Hi, I'm Michaela Majoon, host of WXPN's morning show. Remember the Knack? All four of them are here with us now for an in-depth conversation. Can you talk about the state of music when you started out? Disco ruled, right? Disco ruled the radio?
Pretty much. Disco was the flavor of the year, I guess, those years. Or singer-songwriterism was very big. People always lumped us with some new wave, but we're just a rock and roll band. We've always just been a rock and roll band. We play rock and roll music. We played rock and roll music. This is the kind of music I've been playing since I was 11 years old, and it's kind of the only kind of music I ever really liked to play.
There was a healthy club scene in LA at that time when we first started playing. And there were a lot of good bands that were getting, it was the first time in a long time that a band wasn't assigned, have a record out band and was still getting a lot of attention. And we were one of the first to kind of take advantage of that.
So it was before X?
Oh yeah,
right about
well,
the same time.
they were around.
Yeah.
They were around. There were other things. They were on the punk scene. The punk scene was pretty happening, but the regular club scene was fairly moribund. It had died, and people credited us with bringing it back because disco had come in and people could make more money not hiring bands and playing records and having people dance with one of these mirrored balls going around in circles. So we would come along and play for free and pack their clubs, and they loved it. But it did well for us because it created an audience, and we kind of created our own scene. We weren't really part of the other things that were going on, but there were other bands in LA that were happening.
No, I mean, it really was quick. We got signed, our first gig in Hollywood was June 1, 1978, and the record came out June 1, 1979, and we blinked twice and it had gone gold, and we blinked 4 times and it had gone platinum, and we were #1.
You went gold in like 2 weeks or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
I mean, it was outrageous.
Yeah, 13 days.
We had a lot of good fortune, but I know Doug made an album in the late 60s. I made my first album in 71. Berton had been writing and making albums that I never heard of, but they were there. And no, we all experienced players. Bruce Gary, who played drums, had a lot of sessions in England. So we were accomplished musicians as well to go along with the great songs and the vibe and the trousers and all that, you know.
But I read that you were also gigging with people like Springsteen and Tom Petty before you got signed.
Well, they came up and asked us if they could jam with us, pretty much. I mean, Springsteen didn't. We asked him up on stage. He came down to see us. He was in the audience, and what started happening was we were playing and we were getting very popular around town, and some of these famous musicians would come down and see us, and then they'd come backstage and ask if they could jam with us. And the first of them was Ray Manzarek of the Doors, and we did 2 shows with him, actually. And then Eddie Money came down. He jammed with us. He brought Tom Petty down the next time. They jammed with us. Then Stephen Stills came down. He jammed with us. Then Springsteen came down, and he was the last of that group. And then we got the next Monday. That was on a Friday, and the following Monday we had like 15 record company offers. So that was probably the end of our first run. But by then we'd done 150 dates since we had started.
Well, I when the Knack first came out, or hit the scene, whatever you want to call it, I had just moved out from Phoenix, and I was hustling around trying to get in a band, and they had already, their first record had already come out, and it was heavy disco was being played all over the radio. So it really appealed to me, because the drums were such a prominent sound, and they're a live band, which is just, that's all I wanted to be about. So all of a sudden on the radio, I'm hearing drums that were, people singing and playing, 4 guys, and you can identify the 4 players playing, not this overproduced, lush, fancy sort of marching band thing going on. So I saw the Knack once because a buddy of mine's band opened up for him, and I happened to go. I was up in San Jose area or something, and it was great. I was just so excited about it, and never thought that I would ever end up being in the Knack, but we met, I don't know, gosh, almost 15 years later.
Yeah.
And through circumstance, I ended up hooking up with these guys, and it's really a lot of fun because for a drummer, I mean, it's like Keith Moon meets Buddy Rich, and it's really a lot of fun.
I didn't mean it in the sense of being stupid, although there's good stupid and there's bad stupid. Goofy in the sense of fun.
Yeah.
Letting yourself go, not being
Fun.
afraid to let yourself go. I think that's what you sort of
Exactly
meant.
right. Not being too cool for school.
Not a little too tight, huh?
Yeah,
When we
exactly.
started playing live in '78, the classic stance on stage was angry young man, which worked for a couple people because they were really good at it.
Because they
But it-
were angry young men.
Yeah, but it got old quick, and so we always made a point of not hiding what a great time you have when you get up and play. It's fun, it's a kick, it's what everybody wants to do. And that would always translate to the audience. The audience would be like one big grin coming back at us. And what I think is funny is how many years we are down the line and the classic stance is still angry young man. And it's just as old as it was, you know, back in 78.
Well, we were on Capitol, and in order to market us, they had to come up. They hadn't had a huge success like the Fab Four since the Fab Four. They were trailing in the record label sweepstakes, and we came along, and they felt they won us. But we, as a matter of fact, did pick them because we felt the most comfortable with them as people. And we thought that they could do a good job. We actually, if we would have gone with Warner Brothers, would have sold more records. But that's, you know, it was the Capitol thing, really. Because if we had been on Warner Brothers, nobody would have said anything about it. And it was the back cover of the first album. And the back cover of the first album was a conscious attempt to make a tongue-in-cheek joke about the next big thing. Now, it's hard for people nowadays to even think about that slogan,
Right.
the next big thing. But back in 1978, 79, it was all you heard. What's the next big thing? What's the next big thing? And our comment was, you want to know what the next big thing is? It's just like the last big thing. And it was kind of silly, tongue-in-cheek joke. And had we sold 50,000 copies, which Capitol expected us to. Capitol, I never forget Rupert Perry, the head of A&R, saying to me, Doug, we'll be lucky if we sell 50,000 copies of your first album. If we sell 50,000 copies, we will be ecstatic. Because we originally wanted to do a double album for our first album, and they said, no, you can't do that, it'll cost too much, nobody will buy it, blah, blah. Because we had the first and second albums already done, written. They were our live show. And they said, no, you can't do that. So we put this tongue-in-cheek joke on the back, and had we only sold 50,000 copies, everybody would have gotten the joke, and it would have been funny, and they would have got it, and then the next album would have come out, and whatever. I always thought that we sounded much more like an amalgam of The Who and the Kinks, much more than the Beatles, and I think that was much more of a conscious effort, you know, to write songs with the power and dynamics of The Who, with the kind of intelligent, thoughtful, wry approach of a Ray Davies in the lyric and also in the. But we're influenced by everybody who's good. You know, the truth is that we're influenced by everybody who came before us, who we loved. And that could be anybody from Berton, name somebody.
Berton
Berton
Averre.
It was just a whole.
From Burt Bacharach to Odetta to Charlie Parker,
Sam the Sham.
to Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs,
Yardbirds.
to, you know.
We grew up in I hate to say golden because that's been really misused.
It was the golden
We had
age of
we had a
pop music.
Renaissance period of music, whereas we can have you look at the charts. Burton would sometimes call me and go, hey, remember what happened in 1969? You look at a month in '69 because you listen to satellite radio, and it's just incredible.
Every song is not only a song that you know, it's a classic song. It's not only a famous song, it's a one in a million song, and yet the charts were full of them. And
we were
so
lucky.
we were lucky to have come up in that, and that's what we tried to emulate. We wanted to do that same thing, to have every song on our records be good. And as a matter of fact, I still feel that I'm proud of every song this band has ever committed to vinyl,
And all the ones that didn't make vinyl.
and all the ones that didn't make vinyl and only made these silver discs. that
Ones
they
and
have.
zeros.
The ones and zeros, yeah. The back cover?
Yeah.
Well, it was 4 guys on a television soundstage in white shirts and black ties playing their music. And it looked suspiciously like another 4 guys, but not exactly. It was a little bit different. And yet it rang true for us, because where did we actually first see rock and roll? On television, on a television stage. That's where I first saw rock and roll. Elvis Presley on the Steve Allen show is where I first saw rock and roll. And then, of course, the British Invasion, all those guys. Every group, on either Hullabaloo or Shindig or the Ed Sullivan show. And so we did that comment. But that's what it was. And it has caused us, to this day, an unknown amount of grief. Had we even had an inkling that we would have sold close to 6 million copies of our first album, we wouldn't have even thought to do that. But
So who is Sharona? Who was the inspiration for this album?
she was our first fan, and her 3 friends came to see us, and they saw us at our showcase, along with our family, which is the only other people who were at the showcase, our families. And they brought their friends to our first gig, which doubled the audience. And then they and their friends brought their friends to our second gig, which quadrupled the audience. And by our 5th show, we had a line around the block. And it really was due to Sharona and her friends. And she was a girl that I fell madly in love with and compelled me. She was, for lack of a better description, my muse. And most of the songs on the first album, second album, and a lot of the songs on the third album are written about her.